You are now listening to the Music Mania podcast, a hard-hitting show featuring all things hard rock and heavy metal. And now here are your hosts, the Twins of Chaos, Clint Switzer and Paul Lagana.
So Paul, our last show that we talked about the blues, we had Paul Nelson and Lance Lopez. It was so big, the audience demanded more, man. They wanted to hear more blues, and we have James Montgomery and Joe Louis Walker coming on this show today, man. Going to talk about Joe Louis Walker's new album, Everyone Wants a Piece. James Montgomery as well, a Detroit area blues musician, one of the best of all time, best blues harmonica players ever. Paul, we're back to talking blues. I'm glad we are because, as you always say, if you've ingrained it into my head once, you've done it a million times, the blues influenced everything, including the hard rock that you and I find so dear to our hearts.
That's right, buddy. And I'll tell you what, you talk to anybody back in the 80s and 90s, and they will tell you that they have been influenced by the blues.
You're absolutely correct, and I think that's important to talk to these artists James Montgomery's been around. James Montgomery and Joe Louis Walker, these guys are in their 60s. They've been around. They're out touring. They're out doing what they do. These guys are blues musicians to the core, and it is a pleasure for us to talk to them. And guys, before we get into those interviews, guys, we can't thank you enough for downloading on iTunes, finding our show, subscribing on YouTube, following us on our social medias. We cannot thank you enough. Please leave us a good star rating if you download on iTunes. We cannot thank you guys enough for tuning in and listening. We love talking to these musicians. It's what we do. You know that you don't want to turn into a podcast and just hear us talk about our lives, what we had for dinner last night, which, by the way, I had a Chinese buffet. It was amazing at the Hunan's in Liberty.
And I had steak.
What was it, medium rare? Well done?
Well, I had to throw it away, but no.
Okay, I don't know. Are you going to Texas Roadhouse or something? I don't want to go where you were going. But see, that's what we're. And Paul, we're want to be friendly to the audience. We like to bring on guests that people want to hear from, and so they don't have to hear us yab about. You turn on the radio, you hear sports radio, you hear talk radio on the AM, you just hear a bunch of just gobbledygook. Here on the Music Mania podcast, Paul, you won't find it because we're always talking to these musicians. That's what we like to do,
right,
man.
And that's our content of the show, basically, is to give you guys the best possible interviews we can. And like Clint said, we don't want to bore you all with all our life details, but sometimes it is fun. I
mean, some of our stories are interesting. I mean, we have been through a thing or two together. Right. Let's just be honest.
No doubt about that.
We've stayed in Motel 6s from coast to coast. And that's probably our most glamorous. I mean, our hotel situation. We always cheap it up. You and I are both cheap hotel stayers.
Right.
And
Motel 6.
If anyone else is with us, they have to be subjected to our rules or the highway. Man, sleep in your car or the Motel 6. It's one of the two. So, and I know that these guys. I mean, James Montgomery, Joe Louis Walker. These are two musicians that, man, they've been around. They've done so much. They've done so much for music. Both of them. Joe Louis Walker is a guy. He's a Bay Area guy. Grew up listening to the Muddy Waters. Heavily influenced by the blues. And James Montgomery grew up in Detroit in an era where Alice Cooper, the MC5, Iggy Pop, and the Stooges were coming out. So he has that high energy, live show that really was cultivated in Detroit during that time. So, and currently we are being joined by a man that is best known as the lead singer, blues harmonica player, frontman, and band leader of the James Montgomery Blues Bands, and of course, Mr. James Montgomery himself. James, welcome to the show. How's everything going, my man?
Everything's going great, especially now that I'm on your show. This is now things are really going great.
Well, thank goodness.
I appreciate you having me on.
No one's ever said that before, so we are honored to have you. We are honored to have you, James, and no one's ever given us quite a plug like that. So things are off to a great start. We can't thank you enough, man. But hey, you're out on tour right now. I mean, you got a tour going through the summer. Definitely a lot of dates in May and June, and a big festival in July, man. You got to feel great out there, out performing and doing what you do best, man.
Yeah, we like to work a lot. The band is now 46, 47 years old, something like that. And we always have heavy workload. We just finished work on a brand new record that's going to be released on Cleopatra Records. It's a tribute to Paul Butterfield. Although I hate to use that word tribute because of these tribute bands, because we rearranged a lot of stuff. But it's kind of dedicated to Paul. Who we think was overlooked. We were thrilled when he got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so I guess to a certain extent he hasn't been overlooked. But we're big Butterfield fans, and my bass player and I wanted to do an album of his stuff for a long time, so we're excited about that. We'll be coming out, we'll be touring, and there's also a documentary about Paul Butterfield. They flew me out to Chicago to be in that, and Bonnie Lady, Nelson Bishop, and a bunch of people. So it's going to be a Paul Butterfield summer is what it's going to be. So we're really looking forward to playing and promoting the film and also promoting the record.
Well, I was going to ask you about that record, and of course, that's going to. When might we see that being released? Is that something that's coming up here, here in 2016, or are we going to have to wait till 2017 for that?
Well, no, it's been mastered. The artwork is almost finished, and we want to get it out as soon as we can. I think we'll probably tour this summer to support that record.
Well, we got
Jimmy Vivino on it, the music director of the Conan O'Brien band, and we got the amazing Grace Kelly, who is the most amazing young saxophonist on the planet, who played with Wynton Marsalis when she was 14, and now she's a regular on John Baptiste and the Stay Human band on the Stephen Colbert show. So we got all the heavy duty players from the talk shows, from the late night talk shows, and then we have Paul Nelson from the Johnny Winter band. And we actually got Mark Naftalin, the original keyboard player with the Paul Butterfield band, to be on the record too. So we got some great guest stars, and we really had a ball putting it together.
That's an all-star lineup, and Paul Nelson, of course, he is an alumni here of the Music Mania podcast, so everyone in good company here, and I'll tell you what, looking very much forward to that. I know you have a show coming up this Friday at the Palace Theater in Waterbury, Connecticut, and you can go to jamesmontgomery.com, and they'll have all the dates on there, but this Friday at the Palace Theater in Waterbury, definitely check out the James Montgomery Blues Band. Something I find interesting about you, you're from Detroit, okay? You grew up in Detroit, in an era, you're about the exact same age as guys like Alice Cooper, the MC5, Iggy Pop, and that whole Detroit movement. How aware were you of that movement, and how did you kind of gravitate towards the blues during all that?
Well, my high school band, it was the James Montgomery, the Montgomery Miller Blues Band, and then, of course, at some point in high school, I took LSD and changed the name of the band from the Montgomery Miller Band to the Great Cosmic Expanding. And with that band, we opened for Iggy Pop, but he was Iggy in the Stooges then, and we opened for the MC5. And then, of course, after the LSD wore off, I went back to the Montgomery Miller Blues Band,
Sure.
Started playing 12-bar and stuff like that. But yes, I was totally plugged into that. In high school, we got a review in the Fifth Estate, which was the big underground paper, and it said, keep your eye out for the Cosmic Expanding. These guys remind us of Frank Zappa, so that my high school band was getting compared to Frank Zappa, who I ended up touring with, by the way, years later. But yeah, so we were totally involved in that whole scene there, and then knew all those guys and hung out with John Sinclair and all the big hippies downtown, and it was an exciting time. And then they went and burned the city down, and then there wasn't so much fun there. But why did they have to do that? Everything was going fine until they burned the town down. But anyway, so Detroit musicians, we still stay in touch. I ended up recording with Kid Rock and Uncle Cracker, and Steven Tyler recommended me for the gig. But when Kid Rock found out I was a Detroit guy, that kind of clinched the deal. So we still stay in touch. And I still play with Jimmy McCarty from the Detroit Wheels and Cactus. Every time I go to Detroit, I play with them. So Detroit people have. We have kind of a bond. It's a really great music community.
Well, I mean, you kind of formed your identity though in the Northeast, in the New England area. And in 1970, you formed the James Montgomery Band. I mean, it was really your energetic stage show that kind of, I think, set you guys apart from what maybe blues was known as at the time. I mean, how important for you was it for you guys to forge your identity there in the Northeast? And I mean, that just had to be a great experience.
Yeah, you're right about that too, because my approach has always been high energy, and I think at the time, when we were getting started, the Jay Giles band, of course, was getting started. They got about a 2-year jump on me, but we were both high energy blues-based band. Aerosmith started out really steeped heavily in blues, so these bands were coming out of the Northeast, and there was a time like when James Scott and Junior Wells and all these guys, when they left Muddy's band and wanted to go out on their own, I became a direct disciple of James Cotton. To this day, he calls me son and I call him dad. James Cotton's bands were always high energy, I mean, so when I put my blues band together out here in Boston, I stole my live show. You watch Cock and Barrel from James Cotton, there's a lot of blues Nazis or whatever, that if you go down to Memphis, you have to play everything 12 bar and you can't jump around. Well, I learned everything from James Cotton, and he used to do somersaults off the front of the stage with a wired mic.
Yeah.
And, so we've always been high energy, and because of that, I've always had great players. I've always had the best musicians you can get, and we've always, people sit in with our band for one song and they're out of breath, because it's just an energetic thing. And, which served us well when we spent 13 years on the road opening up for the Allman Brothers and Steve Miller and Marshall Tucker and Leonard Skinner and virtually every band on that circuit, because we always went over great, so they kept hiring us back, so Bill Brand loved the band, so it's been an energetic band, and I say it with all due respect that I stole everything from Cotton. Cotton knows it anyway, I tell him all this stuff in person, so he knows that I stole everything from him.
Oh, well, no secret there. But I mean, you talk about the musicians you played with. I mean, your band has been a springboard for so many musicians. I mean, you Billy Squier, Wayne Kramer. I mean, Jeff Gold played with Rod Stewart. I mean, Jim McCarty that you mentioned from Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels. I mean, that's got to be an accomplishment in and of itself. The amount of musicians that's played with you that has gone on to great success, and that's got to be gratifying for you.
Yeah, it has been. And Peter Wolf at one time he called me the John Mayall of New England, and I love Peter, man. He's one of the all-time greats. So for him to say something like that was, I felt great about that. But yeah, so I've always, the first band I ever started when I was in high school, I said, I better hire some good players because no one's going to pay to see a harmonica player. So so I hired great players and once you get a reputation for that, when somebody goes on, like Billy Squier moved on to do that stroke record that he did and everything, and basically, his band, Jeff Golub and Bobby Chenard were the guys who played with me. It was basically that Billy Squier's stroke record was the James Montgomery band, except with Billy writing all these great hit records and everything. But it's been great to work with these guys and really to be able to play with the best people in the business, which I've done over the years. It's been really good.
Well, I mean, when you look at your own career, I mean, you've played with, whether it be tours or studio sessions with, Greg Allman, Johnny Winter, B.B. King, Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy. I mean, even Aerosmith and the Rolling Stones. Recently, I think you did something with Mick Jagger just a few years ago. I mean, is it just kind of surreal to look back at your career and realize what great people you've associated with?
I will say, the first band I was in was a jug band, and that was I had a blues radio show for years, and every blues musician, almost 100% of them remember the moment they had when they said, "Wow, that's what I want to do." And so for me, it was a jug band, and I used to sit in the basement. I made a harmonica holder out of some wires from my dad's HO train lamp for layout. And I made a harmonica holder out of clothespins and wires, and I built a wash tub bass. I would sit in the basement and play along with Jimmy Reed records. Out the key, it must have drove parents crazy. But anyway, and I would dream about, Jagger and George Harrison and Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker and B.B. King and Junior Wells. And basically, everybody who I dreamt about when I was trying to learn how to play harmonica and trying to get into that jug band, I ended up playing with it at one time or another, and some of the people became lifelong friends and teachers like Junior Wells and John Lee Hooker and especially James Cotton. When I call his house, his wife goes, "Oh, your dad wants to say hello," So it's been really gratifying to play with my heroes, the people that I grew up just idolizing,
Well, when I introed you, I talked about your blues harmonica skills. That, of course, you said no one wants to come see a harmonica player, but the truth of it is, you're being modest. You're one of the greats that ever lived as far as the blues harp goes. And do you feel like that's a lost art today in music and in the blues?
Well, and there's so many great players. I always tell people, and I'm not being modest, but I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not as great a player as some of these guys, but I'm not as bad a player as some others. you know. But the one thing I'm able to do with my playing is really get it across. You know, I know I've sat in with the Blues Brothers a couple of times where they had 2 or 3 harmonica players come out and accolade and blues. She said, you know, James, we always save you for last because we know you're going to hit the home run. So, I mean, I know that the guys who got up there and played before me, you know more about the instrument, like quote unquote better players than me. But I'm pretty good at getting the energy across to the crowd, and that's you know, I'm kind of a band leader who's a pretty good harmonica player. Rather than a great harmonica player who happens to front of hand, something like that.
Sure.
But it's been great, you know. I think I'd have to do the math, which is not my strong suit. So, you know, where's my calculator? But I think the band is like 46 or 47 years old this year. So you know, that's pretty good to still be going out. You know?
Yes, it's wonderful. And I'll tell you what, again, guys, this weekend, Friday, May 20th. They will be at the Palace Theater and at West Waterbury, Connecticut. I'm sorry, and then Saturday at the Amazing Things Art Center in Framingham, Massachusetts. I have some really bizarre memories of Framingham myself outside of Boston. That's going to be a great weekend coming up for guys. Go check it out, and for the rest of the dates at jamesmontgomery.com, man.
And that following Wednesday, you know, with Grace Kelly at the Mystic Theater in Mystic, Connecticut. And that show, I mean, she just released a new CD, and she's got a lot of great new material. You know, she's on the Stephen Colbert show, but she's also on that show, the Bosch Detective Show. So we're looking forward to that show, and that's at a luxury cinema where, you know, when you sit down in the seats, you like sit down in the seats. You know, so the show with Grace Kelly is going to be fantastic. Also on that Wednesday the 25th. So we're looking forward to all that stuff.
Well, great stuff. And I'll tell you what, James, let's keep in touch. And whenever the new album drops, let us know. We'll do anything we can to promote that for you, because that sounds like a great lineup. We've already had Paul Nelson on this show. We've had Lance Lopez on this show. We've got Joe Louis Walker coming up on this very podcast in our next segment. So I'll tell you what.
You know, and that's great. You know, and thank goodness. You know, look, make sure you jot this down that you're lucky to have a show like this that you can tune into. And thank God that there's shows that play blues and niche music, you know, instead of the same pop music over and over again. So, you know, musicians owe a debt to people like you who have these great shows and provide the listeners with stuff that they would never hear anywhere else. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Yes.
All the people you just mentioned, the blues community is really tight knit, and we're all pals. We all love each other, and it's great to have a show like yours that we can get on.
Well, that means a lot, James. I'll tell you what, I realized how close-knit it was whenever I'm looking at all these albums and I see Paul Nelson's name as producing almost all of them. I'm like, okay, wait a second. There's definitely a connection here. Everybody's definitely on each other's records. I think that's great. I think that's what it's all about. I mean, you guys are it's a fraternity, tight-knit group. I mean, that's what the blues is all about, and the blues influenced everything. So
Absolutely.
That's what's important. So I'll tell you what, James, we can't thank you enough. We're going to catch up somewhere down the road. We're going to come see you. We're here in the Midwest, so anytime you get up here near the state of Missouri or anywhere around here, we're going to come see you, and let's catch up after the record drops, and we'll do it again, my man. We can't thank you enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to being on your show again, and I can't wait for you to hear our arrangement of One More Heartache and our arrangement of Born in Chicago, which are totally different than the way Paul did them, but I think you're going to like it.
Cannot wait for that, James. Thank you so much, and we will catch up again soon, my man. We appreciate it.
Thank you very, very much.
You bet. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
A big thanks to James Montgomery for joining us. Definitely go out and catch him on this tour and look for the new album from him. He's a great one, man. He's a great guy, one of the best blues harmonica players you'll ever hear, and that's a lost art today. And it is our pleasure here on the Music Mania podcast to welcome our second guest of this podcast. It is Blues Hall of Famer Joe Louis Walker, JLW. Welcome to the show, man. How's everything going, my man?
Everything's going okay. How
Oh, going great, man. I got your album here, and I want to start with that because it's the new album is Everybody Wants a Piece, and everybody's been talking about it. It's getting great reviews. I mean, what's the reception been for you, and how proud of you are this album? It came out in 2015.
Well, I mean, we've got some pretty good reception all over the world with it. We've been touring different places, supporting the record, but we're going to go out, you know, and do it in England and what have you, and Europe and touring some more, but we really have just got a lot of people that really enjoy it.
Well, it's a great record. It's Witchcraft right now, kind of standing out to me as one of my favorite songs. I think that's one that's been brought up a lot on the reviews I've read. This is a great album. You talk about being on tour, and I mean, as a blues guitarist, that's what you do. I mean, you're on tour, you're out playing live, and you talked about you got a few dates coming up here in New York coming up, and then you're going off to the UK, France, and Switzerland. Man, you're just out there playing. How cool is that?
Well, it keeps you busy, and you keeps you fresh because you meet a lot of people, and it's real supportive,
Sure, and I mean, you guys just want to, before, in case anyone wants to check out the dates, guys, they're on joelewiswalker.com, but he's going to be this Friday night in Cleveland, and then in St. Joseph, Michigan on Saturday. Don't miss those weekend shows before heading to New York, man. So just the tour's going well. I think that what's fascinating about you, and you're, a legend, you're a Blues Hall of Famer. You've been around, you've played with so many people, but I mean, you picked up a guitar and it started at a young age. I mean, you grew up in the Bay Area. Just kind of talk about your upbringing, growing up in San Francisco, and kind of how you got into music and kind of who your influences were.
Well, I mean, my parents come from in South, so we up in the youngest, I had all from my parents and my older brothers and sisters, what have you. So that was the big influence on me with my parents. So to me, it was like music was a natural thing. It wasn't like something my friends' fathers played guitars and stuff. My cousins played guitars, so and pianos and drums. So it was one of those things where it was like freezing. I mean, so in the area I grew up in, there was a lot of musicians in the area. Myself, Sly Stone, different people like that. And then when all the hippies started doing that thing, a lot of people were moving to the area to wait for bands that lived far away and just an airplane. And a lot of musicians were sort of just getting their careers going, finding it, working their craft, so to speak. So it was a good time.
Well, you talk about the kind of the hippies that moved out to California during that time, but one that kind of crossed all boundaries, of course, was Jimi Hendrix. I mean, I think you knew Jimmy. What was your relationship like with him? I mean, he crossed the bridge, man. He bridged the gap between all types of music, and how influential was he just on the world itself?
Well, I think a big part of it was the times that Jimi Hendrix came out in was I think a lot of people were experimenting with music. Where we lived in the Bay Area, we started FM radio. Bill Graham eventually came and took over the Film Auditorium, and there would be 3 different genres of different music played acts. And now you had Grateful Dead, Ornette Coleman, and Muddy Waters. Or you'd have Quicksilver Messenger Service, Howard Wolf, and Boba Fett, classical guitar player. So you got an education. If you didn't have one, you sort of grew up in that environment, and the people you seen playing, you see on the street.
Sure.
Yeah. Was like Elvis Presley was wasn't walking down the street. You'd see everybody, and you'd see Janis Joplin, and she'd come and she'd go to H. So I mean, it was and it was a different time. I think in people sort of contesting old mores, so to speak.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and you grew the time that you came up in as really kind of the foundations of music and blues. Really, as a blues guitar player, as well as anyone, the blues kind of influenced everything. I mean, how do you feel about when you were coming along, and then you had like Little Richard, that guys like that really kind of were the starters of rock and roll. But then you have someone like Elvis that comes along and takes it to the mainstream. I mean, there were so many bands that came along before that. A lot of the African American musicians that really started with the blues, the American blues, and rock and roll. And then you got Elvis comes along and just takes it to the mainstream, and everybody considers Elvis kind of the beginning of rock and roll. But there were so many other artists that contributed, aren't there?
Well, I like to look at it like this. When rock and roll began, it's like that Muddy Waters song, "Blues Had a Baby," they called it rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's all American music. But I mean, the point you make is very well taken. I mean, if I was Little Richard and Pat Boone came along and did a Tutti Frutti, and sort of saccharinized, so to speak. And made twice, maybe 50 times as much as you made. I would, wonder, well, why is it? And then, boom, there's this big epiphany and this big blow up, and you have all the British guys coming over saying, well, these are the guys that we listen to. We never listened to Fat Boom. I guarantee you, Keith Richards never listened to that. Paul McCartney didn't listen to Fat Boom to
Sure.
Little Richard, that's where he stays the high notes like Little Richard. Taught him how to do it. He was offered a part of the Beatles, and Little Richard said, none of he didn't turn it down from Friday. So, but there was that connection. All the British guys made the connection. And so when they came over, of course they were, famous themselves, but they wanted to point the Americans toward the guys, the originators. And, maybe you got the answer to why that sort of situation is always prevalent. I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's important everyone goes, and like you were, of course, you were heavily influenced by T-Bone Walker, T-Bone Walker, B.B. King, and those kind of guys. And I think it's important everyone to go back and kind of immerse themselves in that music. And this is just such an all-encompassing thing. But I want to go back to your album, which is Everybody Wants a Piece, because it's just the reviews are great. I'm looking at this one from Bluebird Reviews. It says it's a record that oozes authenticity and passion for the blues in all different musical shades or colors applicable to the genre. Now that's a mouthful. That's a great review. And this Paul Nelson, who's an alumni of our podcast, has been on the show before, produced the album. What was it like working with Paul? He's a great player himself, of course.
Yeah, well, Paul worked with Johnny Winters for when Johnny came back and it was released, hitting on all cylinders, and he managed Paul and did a great job. Managed Johnny Winters and did a great job, and he did a great job producing the record also. So we were very fortunate to have him.
Well, you've just been around so long and done so many things, but in 2016 you were honored as the BMA Contemporary Blues Male Artist of the Year. I know that, rock and roll and blues, playing music isn't all about just personal achievements, but it's got to feel good to be not only to win this award, to be a Blues Hall of Famer. That's just got to be a great feeling.
Yes, and, especially when the people who, could be scholars of the music, will put you in Hall of Fame. It's definitely an honor, and it's an honor to, me being, sticking to what I do and my little version of what I do, and I appreciate that.
Well, you're a legendary boundary-pushing icon of modern blues, but today you say that kind of your best route is influencing other young players. How important is that to you to be able to pass on your years of knowledge on to other young players that are trying to get into the genre or just playing guitar in general?
Well, I think there's a lot of great young musicians really doing a lot of good things with the blues and putting their own stamp on it. And right now, it's just a plethora of young people all over England and United States, France, especially South America. There's just many great young musicians carrying on the tradition and doing it their own way, which is really cool.
Well, I want to remind everyone that if you want to check out Joe Louis Walker, one of the great live blues players of all time, guys, the Music Box Supper Club, it's May 20th, and then Saturday the 21st in St. Joseph, Michigan. And that's going to be at the Blues and Bluegrass Festival, a Taste of Michigan. Great stuff. You got a big tour coming up. Joe, man, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. Everybody, be sure to go to joelouiswalker.com to check out all the tour dates and to buy the album, because that is a great one. Joe, man, we look forward to catching up to you sometime down the road and checking you out live, and we just really appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Thanks a million. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Bye-bye.
That was James Montgomery and Joe Louis Walker. Both. We can't thank them enough for being on our show.
Dude, it was a pleasure to have both of them. The blues is something I've delved into so much just from talking to artists like this. Also, Lance Lopez and Paul Nelson, who were on our show previously, about a month ago. And these guys have really influenced me to get into the blues and to look more into it. There's so much great music out there. You don't want to just pigeonhole yourself with just one genre, and I'm so glad I did. Thank you so much to those guys. Thank you so much for listening to the Music Mania podcast, Paul. It is just a pleasure sitting in here with you every week doing this show, talking to the musicians that we look up to the most. It is great, and can't think enough as we get ready set to head to Rocklahoma. We got some big shows coming up here at the end of the month and on into the summer, Paul. It's a secret. We can't really reveal it right now, but we have a lot of great guests coming up, man, from the world of hard rock. That's what we do. That's what we love to do.
That's what we do, Clint. And we can't thank everybody enough again for listening. Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes. Everybody get out and see some shows as well.
Mississippi Queen, she taught me everything.